some of the that is very kindly by the government prior to Christmas. You will note on the screen at the moment that is actually the agenda as we're going to work through the various bits of legislation. So we're also going to quickly touch on the question as well. So but I'll hand over to Chris for a Karakia and some opening comments. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Warren, and nice to see you all again. Whakataka taho ki te uru, whakataka taho ki te tonga, kia makinikina ki uta, ki mataratara ki tai, hi aka ana te arakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, he hei, mauri ora.
Opening comments from yourself?
Yeah, hey, thanks. Nice to have you back around the table. Online, I've noticed at the moment. So we're focusing mainly on 3 proposals today, as was noted on the agenda. That work that staff have put in last month or so. You'll see some of the what you've got before you is quite detailed, and staff have poured over a lot of aspects of it to understand how it affects this council, how the system is going to work going forward. I'll just note we've been privy, and you probably have too, to a whole lot of draft submissions on these. There's a lot of different entities doing them. Local Government New Zealand are putting stuff out. Taituara, which is the local government managers side of things, are putting submissions out. The regional sector via Turuka are putting submissions out. And the leadership in Waikato versus the Mayoral Forum are making comments and putting submissions on things. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of draft submissions circulating around from the councils. So I guess that we've been trying to take note of what everybody's saying, and any good points that are relevant to the Waikato. I guess we've been trying to work that in as we see it, but it's hard to keep up with everything as it's coming out. Obviously, for some of what you've got in front of you, there's a lot of detail, and I guess that what you need to do is just distill, what's important from the governance perspective that you want to get across. You don't need to worry about the detail of everything, because some of what we've needed to do is actually think that the way the legislation's been drafted and written, will it work? And there's a whole lot of technical things and bits and pieces that we've identified would need to be fixed to make it work. So I'm just saying there's a lot of paperwork there. There's a lot of submission points on some of the legislation. You don't have to be across all of it, but you definitely need to know that the direction of it is that you're comfortable with. And I guess we're looking for high level agreement and direction from council today. Just as a bit of a teaser, a couple of areas yet that you might be interested in. As an example, in the rates capping, do we think there are some matters that should be excluded from a cap? Things like certain events, emergency management, that and everything that was going on around today. Improving that in the emergencies be within it. Public transport, the government puts out what the inflation indices are that we have to work with for public transport, and they're usually way higher than the general rate of inflation. So is that something that you think should be within or without? And then there's obviously, the assets. If people want new capital assets, or if we're going to maintain them, and the cost drivers of them are above rates of inflation, is it something that you think should be within or excluded from it? In the natural environment bill and planning bills, obviously transitional arrangements are going to be key, and what the roles of territorial authorities and regional councils are to ensure that the regional council functions are adequately looked after. Clearly, there's a couple of things that are critical to the Waikato that need to be addressed in the bills. One's the treaty settlements, and we know that a lot of that's missing in action. So some councils are pushing to have Te Tiriti as part of the legislation included. So there's a lot of posturing going on around the place, but we know from having to implement whatever the government gives us, it needs to be clear and it needs to work so it doesn't fall back onto us. So you might have views on that as an example. Just another one with the replacement of resource. Our council's probably had one of, if not the most permissive plan out of all regional councils around the country. So we do have a lot of experience implementing permitted activities. And obviously the new legislation they're proposing to be much more permissive. And so you'll see a bunch of comments around there, probably from our experience in that space. With the simplifying local government, I know there's a whole lot of thoughts around that. At the Mayoral Forum last week, I think it was last week, they have agreed that included in the combined territorial board, whether it's formal or just by way of working. So they'll be pushing for that. The question is that enough? Should we have our chair and deputy chair, regional council functions and activities? We don't want to get lost in the mire because it's absolutely critical for the region to be able to work going forward. So my question is, how bullish do you want to be in making suggestions for the Waikato? Do you want to push for a 3-year term? And be very upfront with reasons why you'd want to do that. Look, my final comment is, whilst there are 3 pieces of legislation we've talked about this before, it's all got to work together for the system to work. It's all very well saying you want to achieve, the government wants to achieve this piece of legislation, but it needs other pieces of legislation to make it work. And so they've all got to tie together somehow. And I know that you'll see in some parts of the submissions we make comments on that, but you might want to express views on that strongly or otherwise as well. So it's just a few opening remarks. I'm just trying to get you to think, from the government situation, what might be important, just because there are so many pages of detail. Some of it's about fixing stuff, if that's what the government wants to make it work.
Yeah, Ben, just quickly.
Just a very brief question. In terms of the submissions, how much do you think government's going to listen, given the short timeframes, and how are they going to listen? Is it going to be AI that assesses things? If someone can give us feedback on how these things are done.
I think we could probably touch on that as we work through.
Yeah, and the one comment I think I'd say is that the government, it will be AI'd and they'll go through their processes. In the past, and Tracy might want to comment on this, we've found that government officials do listen to the Waikato, partly because there's a whole lot of things happen in the Waikato, like I talk about permissive regimes, like I talk about treaty settlements that don't happen elsewhere, and they have to listen to us to try and work out what they need to do. So they do, and that's why I think it's important to pull out what are those unique things about the Waikato that they need to consider, which aren't possibly just generic across the whole country. And Tracy?
One of the comments I was going to make is we always talk about the Waikato being unique and different, and each other region of the country is unique and different, but what we are is more complex. So we do have staff from the major ministries already working, our staff working with those staff, because we do have generally the most complex region with all of the issues. We know that staff from ministries will take out our submission and read it in more detail. And that applies equally to Environment Canterbury as well, because those are the at-scale issue regions really in the country. So we also know that AI is going to be used well. So that is one thing on a slide further down where I've said we will be AI, and it's challenging given the time we've got, but we will be AI road testing our submissions, pretending that we are staff advising ministers who are making these decisions with what questions. Now we'll just do that informally to make sure that the right words are being used and pop up, because I think that's really important. And we did ask some officials if there was any guidance, any words, any questions that we should be asking ourselves to run through AI. Like good officials, they didn't give us any advice in that regard and said, I'm sure you've got enough information. We know that the, perhaps if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. We know that the RM bills are progressing through the select committee stage. So we have indicated that we want to be heard, and it is generally our chair and chief executive with relevant staff who will present there. We've been, I guess, pretty judicious in our presentations. We learned a lot last training. The select committee don't want all the bump and detail and lead in and intro. What are your key issues? What are some key examples? And that put us in really good stead last training. So we'll be doing the same here. The rates capping, that's just going to be a decision goes through cabinet. And the simplifying local government, there are a number of other matters that will be happening, and we've got a detailed timeline where we've popped them all together. We'll get this before Stratton Poll. So one that we do know is going through select committee are these darlings, the two bills. The rest, we're not sure quite how they're going to progress.
Thanks for that, Tracy. I'll just quickly jump on a couple of process things. So just remember, for transparency, of course, this is being recorded, so please make sure the mics come up nice and close. Secondly, apologies. I have had an apology from Karakia. I don't know, does anyone have any other apologies?
Keith.
Keith?
Yeah. Noel's got a doctor's appointment, be here about 10.
All for lateness. Okay.
Yeah, 10:30.
Thank you. So back to you, Tracy, and sorry. Yep, early departure noted, Gary.
Thanks, Warren. And I forgot to say, Happy New Year, councillors. Lovely to have you back. We've been back a while, and before start, I just do want to reiterate Chris's comments. The work done by the team, it's been fantastic, and that's the wider team across council, as well as our folk who get to spin all the inputs into something cogent. In terms of the submissions, I just wanted to put that up for you because we're only dealing with 3 of those today. The development levies, infrastructure, funding and financing, will be dealing with its strategy and policy. Really, my minutiae, I'd say, in terms of the wider scheme of things, but still some things that we want to raise. The rates target model, the rates capping submission, that's due next week. So, can we just go back? Sorry. So, we're hoping, following the discussion today, to get that signed off by Chris next week and lodged. Remember, when that consultation first started, DIA weren't even going out to individual councils. They were just going out to entities representing council. So the fact that the timeline is truncated is a challenge, but it is also good that we've been offered to have direct input. The other submissions will travel through strategy and policy on the 10th. That will meet each of their submission dates. You'll see that the documents are working draft. We've got
Tracy, can I interrupt you? Can we just go quickly to comments around the civil defence one? Because Gary does need to get away.
So there are also...
Just a brief outline, thanks.
Sorry, there are also amendments to civil defence emergency management bills. Now, in terms of those matters, a submission has been prepared for that by Waikato Civil Defence Group, and Brent could talk more to that. But in essence, from a Waikato Regional Council perspective, staff reviewed the proposed bills and the proposals late last year and thought, from a purely WRC perspective, there is very little that wouldn't be covered in the Civil Defence Emergency Management submission that is going through the group today, I believe, is the discussion. Brent, did you want to add anything to that?
No, you got it spot on. So the submission subcommittee of the joint committee is meeting actually right now to go through the submission that CDM has put together for the group.
And if anybody has any questions, I guess I would have anticipated that they would have gone to Gary as our representative.
Only
Well-
question would be, is there any, see any benefit in there being extra endorsement of that submission by that coming council at all? Or is it good where it fits with current process?
From my perspective, much like we deal with the land transport submissions, I think it's best that the power comes from the joint committee.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Thank you,
Um,
Gary. Make sure you look both ways before you cross the road. Yeah.
Yeah, so look, just did want to identify that the submissions are working drafts. We've got that as a footer on each, header on each page. You will see that there are still areas greyed out in terms of insert comment here, double check this, so they are still working drafts. In our attention to getting submissions, we still need to look across all of the three major, and I'd call these the three major submissions in front of us to make sure our messaging is consistent and lined up. So that's really what we're after from today as well. If there are key messages that we have missed, then what are those governance messages that go across all those submissions, all those three submissions? I'd invite Warren or Chris to just talk us through what's happening with the Waikato Mayoral Forum, because you will see that we indicated in each of the submissions that there are, not the rates one, sorry, but in the simplifying local government and the RM submissions that the Mayoral Forum is lining up some key messages. So just talk about that. And we've already talked about the kind of road testing through AI that we'll hope to do. So really prefacing our conversation with that, because the submissions might look different by the time they get to Strategy and Policy Committee, and I just want to highlight that for you. Going then now to our first, click on there, Brooke, and we'll totally confuse you having two Brookes in the room shortly. So this is our first submission that we've got in front of you. This is the one that is due next week that we are hoping to get sign off through Chris. We've had Janine and Blair assist Brooke, who is sitting to the left of me. We'll introduce Brooke to councillors because it's Brooke's first time in the chamber, so be gentle. She will be as gentle as you are with her, as she will be with you. Brooke started with us as a summer student probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. Graduated, went and worked in consultancy and then worked upstairs in Rudd for about 18 months processing consents. Since about midway through last year, Brooke has been in Lizette's team and helping us out with submissions and advocacy in that space. So slightly terrified, very friendly. And Brooke will take us through the high points, then we'll have Janine and Blair to respond to any details.
So you want to get questions at the end from councillors?
Yeah, so one thing I
process?
should say is you would have seen a blue question mark on the workshop agenda slide. That's when we'll stop and ask for questions. So what we intend to do is go through each of the proposals, present key messages, and then stop and ask for questions. So if councillors can make note of their questions, that would be great. And obviously over to the chair to see if that works or doesn't work as we go through.
Good as gold. Just noting for councillors too, the rates capping starts on about page 138 or so of your agenda, and the questions around page 140 just helps put things through. Over to you, Brooke B.
Thank you for the introduction, Tracy. The Department of Internal Affairs are currently undertaking targeted consultation on the rates target model for New Zealand, which was announced by central government. Could you please change the slide? In their consultation, they included 5 consultation questions. Consultation closes on the 4th of February. Next slide, please. The proposal is seeking to implement a cap on yearly rates increases, with the proposed band to be between 2 to 4%. The lower bound is based on inflation and the upper bound is based on nominal GDP. This cap is proposed to apply to all rates, general rates, targeted rates, uniform annual charges, however, will not apply to water-related targeted rates, water charges, or non-rates revenue. The proposal does not affect Council's discretion over how rates funding is spent. There is a proposed mechanism to allow for variations in the case of extreme circumstances such as natural hazards. There is also a proposed mechanism to provide a variation process if councils need to raise revenue above the band to pay for things outside of extreme circumstances. Currently, this is just a proposal, with the government signalling the intention to enact relevant legislation later this year. There will be a transition period between 2027 to its full enactment on the 1st of July 2029. Overall, our submission supports the intent of the proposal. However, we have made targeted comments to improve the workability of the rates target model. Next slide, please. Our key submission points include the economic indicators that have been used to base the model off of, particularly the Consumer Price Index, which is a measure of household cost and does not accurately reflect council costs. We have suggested that further work on appropriate indicators to provide the boundaries for the target range be undertaken. We have also raised concerns with the impact that this proposal may have on levels of service and the risk of some services having to move to a user pays model. We have also raised concerns with the uncertainty around financial implications that may result from the natural environment and planning bills. We have highlighted the long-standing infrastructure deficit, as well as a key driver of rates increases being unfunded government mandates, which may take precedence over local priorities, neither of which have been acknowledged in the proposal. We have also raised a point around the lack of details provided in relation to the proposed variation process. Acknowledging that this is a draft, I will now open for feedback or questions.
Just before we go to questions, Blair, is there anything that you wanted to highlight, particularly from your perspective?
Nothing specifically. I guess the overall sort of view that I have of the proposal is that the policy objective is sound and sensible, but there's some big fish hooks in the detail that I think mean that this proposal doesn't address those policy objectives very well.
Thanks, Blair. Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Warren. Just a couple of questions to start with. Our CEO mentioned transport, whether it's appropriate to included. Why you shouldn't be. Reasons for that is that at the moment, transport negotiations are done with each region, fighting against the multinational. The reason the costs are going up is because they've got all the leverage, we've got none. Suggesting that we were combined into one entity nationwide, then we would have the same sort of leverage. If they don't like it, then they go elsewhere. Your questions on that? Suggestion that it must be included. The second point is, what percentage of regional council costs are population based? The only one I can think of is possibly transport, and I think any shortfall there should be covered by air recovery process or airbox. So most of our regional council, I'm aware, pretty much fixed to vary, of course, with cost increases. So I want to know which percentage, because the formula has an adjustment for growth. I believe bonus for council rather than negative. And you're suggesting that CPI is not an appropriate indicator. Can you tell us what you believe should be an appropriate indicator? No point in telling government that it's inappropriate if you don't suggest an alternative. So.
Sorry, Chris, just to clarify, you said the formula, sorry, you were in favour of how the formula accounts for population base or not?
I don't think it's appropriate for regional councils, Tracy, but I'm happy to live with it because it's advantageous to regional councils to have it there. Because, as I said before, depending on what the answer is, I don't believe regional councils need to have that population factor adjustment built into the rates. Team won't agree with me, I don't know. But
And I guess in terms of the first questions around transport, I'd look to Phil and Janine, who have been part of wider conversations about this. They're looking at each other, deciding who's going first.
Let's go to Janine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think some of these points have been, as well as the process that's been working within WRC, I have been hooked in with the development of the Te Uru Kahika submission, which is mirroring a lot of these points. I think the issue with public transport is that at the moment, so public transport as a service represents a significant portion of expenditure for some councils. And if we think regional council sector, so for us, it's about a third of our expenditure. For people like Environment Canterbury, I think it's something like 40%. The cost drivers for that are not set by council. So NZTA tell us what the inflationary movements are. And as the team have indicated, they far outstrip standard CPI. We already have in place fair, I guess, private share targets that council is trying to move towards. But the only alternative under this model to respond to increases in costs that are outside of that 2 to 4% bound is to increase fees and charges effectively. So in the case of public transport, that would be increasing fares. That's actually going to then undermine probably the range of services that we are able to provide as a region. Some people may think that's a good thing, but it's actually, it will become a social inequity in terms of the transport disadvantaged, access to education, healthcare, work, all of those points. So I think it's a consideration of whether it's excluded from the rates cap or whether the calculation of the cap takes into account an adjustment for price movements for some of these key services such as transport.
Any further comment around that, Chris?
I still think it should be included. I think there needs to be a much greater focus put on the cost drivers, and if it's NZTA where the focus should be, that's where the ball needs to be passed back to them. They need to take ownership and responsibility for it too.
So in terms of how we address that in the submission, if it's something council supportive of, then I think it's more sophistication that we're after in the model to account for those external cost drivers.
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
I don't know how NZTA works, but no, like we need to deliver. I believe council needs to deliver a message to them that these level of increases are not acceptable. It's up to you. You're the ones you're the gatekeeper here. You're the ones that are letting us sneak through unchallenged or apparently seemingly unchallenged. We want a greater focus put on that. If you're going to enforce this rates capping on us, happy for transport to be in there, but you're the guys that are going to have to deliver that control to us.
If I could just make an additional comment, I think you premised some of your conversation on how should transport be arranged in New Zealand as well, which is probably a different conversation, which is all part of what are the functions of local government going forward. And I guess that given that the government signalled that there's going to be potentially some change in functions of local government, certainly functions of regional councils going forward, and there's a rapid review going on at the moment, I guess our submission's got to be in the outcome that some form of local government entity is responsible for some or all of public transport. How would it work? I get your point about if the system changes, it means how contracts are managed, that comes down. The question is still going to be, how do you deal with the inflationary impact year after year after year? Once that's sorted out, and I think that's, and it still goes back to the same space. Should 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 some aspect of public transport inflation be included in the rate cap or not? And if it is, for local government, how's that with all the other things that you're also going to consider likely to work?
Thank
Notwithstanding fees and charges, I think you were suggesting that you're in favour of going
Yes.
up to cover the extra costs.
Well, the first thing has to be NZTA need to put a much stricter control on the cost increases. That's where it starts. If they're the ones that are driving the cost increases, I know it's coming from offshore because they want to boost their bottom line at the expense of our ratepayers. Well, we've got to stop that cycle. The only way to do that is put the pressure back on NZTA, who seem to be issuing the directive. So, but yes, Chris, I agree with you in relation to the fare collections, which is the direction of travel for the government anyway. They're trying to get those up to a different level to share the burden between ratepayers and users, which is understandable.
I think that was clear, and I just,
So-
Warren, we probably need to get some field of support of people.
And I think it's the actual value of having all three of these submissions laid out to you today, because the issues that you raise there, Chris, are actually probably better popped into the simplifying local government submission in terms of that quantification of costs. I think what's also important is that each of these proposals, whilst I would say the government is doing it to local government, they equally need to turn the mirror back on themselves, such as NZTA. Not saying don't scrutinise us, please do, but we need to have the confidence that you've also scrutinised your entities you have control for.
Absolutely. Yep,
Now, you had
100%.
two other questions that I was just going to ask if Janine could help us with. The question around what percentage of regional council costs are population based. I don't know if Janine can help us with that one. And probably Blair, if not CPI, then what? So Janine, I don't know if you had any comment about the question.
I've got a speaking order. Can I get Janine a mic, please? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. No real clear thought on that. Certainly it's not such a driver for us as it is for territorial authorities. I think, Chris, you're probably reflecting on the what's effectively a growth adjustment in the figures or in the model. While it references population, I think the regulatory impact statement, DIA, actually used number of rating properties instead of population, so it's per rating unit rather than per person. That's not inconsistent with the way that we consider our rating impacts now, that we factor out growth. So it's the impact to current ratepayers, because we know that growth means that we've actually got more people coming into the region to share the burden of cost. So the model is not inconsistent with that. I think some of the language that's used is being flipped around a bit between population growth, rate per capita versus per rating unit, and they are actually very different. But in principle, the approach isn't actually different to the way that we consider our finances and rating impact.
So Janine, do you think having a population factor in there fair and equitable?
I'm not sure that I would use population, but I think it is. I think from various conversations I've had, I think what the policy is trying to achieve is a limit on the rates that an individual ratepayer pays, because in various conversations it's been that the 2 to 4% actually applies at a rate level and not at total revenue, at a rate level or even down to a differential level in terms of the rates that we assessed, which is quite untenable. But what they're trying to do is to limit the share that a ratepayer, so that you and I currently pay now, that we have certainty around that contribution to the costs won't increase by more than 2 to 4%. That means that there is inherently a growth factor in there.
And our last question, Blair, if not CPI, what? Discuss.
So I think there's various other options that you could look at in official statistics like the capital goods price index and things that reflect infrastructure costs much better. And if those are what's driving the funding requirements of local government, then those would be a better match than a bucket of consumer goods. The council doesn't buy much Marmite. The downside of that is that because all councils are different, and some are very different, if you compare Auckland City to Waikato Regional Council to Buller District, everyone's got a different mix of things that are driving their expenditure. So over time, you might say something like the capital goods price index is a reasonable proxy, but there's going to be a lot of disparity between how that affects different councils.
Yeah, but look, Lee, I understand that, but I understand that targeted rates where most of our capital expenditure occurs are excluded from the formula.
They're not. They're not. And that's one of our
It's all
key
right.
submission points is
Okay. So, so I accept that if the capital, it's all a question of percentages, but that it should be excluded. Any capital works needs to be excluded from the formula. And I understand, maybe I misread that, but I understood that targeted rates is where that 95% of it applies, they should be taken out of there.
so just on that, Chris, that's one of our key submission points in terms of
Thanks.
the targeted rates.
Let's
That,
interpret that.
yeah, no worries, because it's really important. I guess fundamentally, if our ratepayers are prepared to pay for something and have signalled to council they're prepared to pay for it and accept a higher than the 2 to 4% band, then we're saying, hey, we should respond accordingly. Yeah.
And that is noted in the submission, yeah.
But just further to that, there's a school of thought, and I don't know, Janine, if you've heard any it progressed, that it's actually each individual rate line that has to stay within its own cap. So, for example, if you reduced, just hypothetically, public transport funding, stay within a rate cap, you can't move that to a different rate line.
No.
Correct. Correct. That's where,
easy.
But and that is critically important
Untenable.
if we did want to do some capital development for all local government, because you're just not going to be able to because you're just living within the inflation.
Can I note though, in terms of some of the capital conversations, Brooke had referenced there's a couple of scenarios that have been provided around exemptions to the cap, either short-term or more project-related. I have tested whether that, because the model, one of the key assumptions behind the model is that the infrastructure deficit has been addressed. So it is actually projecting some future state at some future point in time that is unknown. And so there has to be variation within the model to actually allow for that deficit to be addressed, which is one of the sort of scenarios or pathways for an exemption. But that then needs to be really deliberately planned and funded over, like say, who knows how long that piece of string is. But yeah, that infrastructure issue is a huge concern within the.
And I think just to be clear, the submission isn't requesting an open-ended checkbook to address the infrastructure deficit. It links it back to the need to be, as Janine said, really open and transparent about that through our infrastructure strategies, through our funding and financing strategies, and through the long-term plan. So we're saying there's something there that isn't addressed. We don't want to carry on. We don't want to not be judicious with rates to address it, but it's not going to be able to be addressed through the simplified formula in the proposal.
Thanks, Tracy. Ben?
Yes, Janine. Targeted rates. We've always heard here that while we might have a 5.7% rate increase, some targeted ratepayers are paying 60% or 30% or, much higher rates. This is going to cap them to 4% maximum.
Yeah, that's certainly my understanding from discussion with DIA. And there's reference, I think, in the document around price versus volume, which is the bit that captures the point that Chris raised, that it's effectively at a rate differential level, that no individual rate could move by more than whatever the target range is. So that becomes an enormous task to actually manage a program of work. You're effectively setting a revenue limit and then needing to work within that for any service that council provides under that model, rather than what is it that we need to do, how might that be funded through economic analysis, which is currently required under the LGA, to then say this is the rating impact. Now, how do we work with that? So it sort of flips the whole system around.
But I don't feel in this submission we've made nearly enough of that fact. I'm just vaguely mentioned, but it will have a huge impact on the flood control schemes. And
yeah, so I think the point that is, and again, Chris's point, but in the submission, consideration of whether flood protection and drainage should be excluded from the cap. Three Waters, water-related funding is outside of it. So why wouldn't flood protection and drainage follow? That's the best outcome, I think, that we could achieve, is that it actually sits outside of the cap.
And when I read this, I don't get that impression from this. And I think given the flood events we've just had, they're top of mind with the government. So, and the Prime Minister's going around and asking councils to spend more on this stuff at the moment. So,
and it links with civil defence being outside of a cap as well. Yeah.
I also think that we mentioned twice, consider alternative methods, inflation question 2, and then question 2 at the bottom, we suggest alternative methods and inflation better reflect. We need to actually define what they are, as Chris said. If it's going to be capital goods, then we should define that rather than simply saying that the current model is not adequate. The outline, when we look at the simplifying local government submission, it goes headline, point, headline, point, headline, point. The front page of this does not do that. And so when I read items 3, 4, and 5, it merges into words rather than clearly making points. And
yep, and that is purely a matter of time to get them before you.
Yep, understand.
So
I mean, but could we
standing.
clarify that?
Yep.
Yep. And that's where I would suggest that the targeted rates and flood protection get raised as an issue. Also, at the back, we've got the additional comments and unfunded mandates, consideration of climate resilience, flood protection, clarity on inclusion and exclusions and connected legislative reform. Those to me could all come up at the very front of the submission. I'm worried that at the back they're going to be lost and just ignored.
That's the intent in terms of the time available to get them out to you. So Brooke up there didn't beat us that you didn't have them.
Yep.
We'll do all that reformatting later. Yeah.
That's fine. The other 2 points are in terms of transport, and it fits under the unfunded mandates, the mandatory electrification of the bus fleet. That's an additional cost coming down to us that has to be met within a 2 to 4% rates cap. Similarly, the impacts of, we're talking about permanent activity, but the impacts of PC1 and regulatory relief, will we be required to pay? If PC1 comes in and tells us that you must now do flood protection and remove this land from.
So plan change 1 does not do that, but we'll address that in the RM bill. Yep. That's definitely an issue to pick up. Yep.
Thank you.
Jen.
Thank you, Chair. I think we all agree on the objective, and I just want to highlight what Blair said at the beginning, but the proposal does not achieve that objective. And I would like that to come through a bit stronger. We can be really nice about it and say we invite further engagement on actually fixing the root causes of the funding model we've known as a broken for so long, but it'd be nice for that to be in there. There's a sentence in there that
talks about, I haven't got the exact page, sorry, but it's a statement that central government and local government work in partnership. And I just can't get behind that sentence. I don't feel it does. I think ideally it would, and so we could change it to say that, but they are not currently working in partnership with us, so I just wouldn't like that to be in there. The coalition government obviously wants the headline of a really popular thing, such as, we're going to do something about rates. I think a really good way to achieve that goal, while also not completely undermining local government, would be to only have it apply to general rates. Sends a really strong message, but allow the targeted rates to figure out what they need to, because they are set by consultation each time. The community says each time what level of service they want, and we work to that. The general rates, I absolutely get the concept of staying in there. And we have to be careful, obviously, when targeted rates are used, and a portion of that is general rates. But I think that's where the driver will come together. But yeah, I'm just really worried that local government won't be able to do anything. And there's a piece in here about highlighting, joint committees are really good, like what we do with the Regional Land Transport Plan. I agree with that. And one of the biggest successes we've had as as regional councils has been the before the deluge funding, which is a more cooperative way of asking for money than the competitive things I see in transport. So anything that goes in that direction is good. I was just worried when I saw that's like with transport, the co-funding is a good way. I worry when it's competitive funding versus that collaborative before the deluge type funding, because we've seen how transport, we're competing against busways in Auckland and Peacock's got nothing. And it's just not logical when people are moving in and there's hardly any car parks, right? So something better there. So I've mentioned that and that. And the example of if we could include an example of how we've kept an eye on how high rates go with our internal policy, with that 10%, I think that's still a good way to highlight, because one other way of this could have been achieved would be for us to consult on that policy with our community and say, what do you want that to be? Do you want it to be 10%? At the moment, I'm pretty sure we'd get a different answer to that. Probably get something like 4% maybe or so. So the community could have set their own target range for their council as well. It didn't need to be top down. Not too worried about whether we mention it. I just think it's worth highlighting that there are two ways of achieving the same goal. But yeah, there's some great work in there. I agree with the others around when we get to that next stage iteration of this, if we can just really highlight those key points so that it doesn't come across as a whole lot of info, but as some really crisp things, because there's some good stuff in there, especially the examples in where we answered on Q2A, which really highlighted that we really can't do our job if this comes in the way it's proposed. Thanks.
Can I just get a feel around the room for Jennifer's suggestion around this applying to general rates? Makes sense. Targeted rates, more nuances needed in the system.
Just raise a question there.
Yep.
So the question would be, presumably the reason they've said targeted rates is so that you don't have a general rate that's 4% and then whole lots of mini targeted rates for bus and, so that we would really want to restrict it to flood control and protection. Is that what
I wasn't suggesting could flood management, river management and drainage. I think we're saying it's just not possible to deliver. Full stop. I think we'd be very honest and say
I think that's the critical
we
message.
can't do it.
Yeah.
I think that we definitely did say, look, we agree with the objective, but general rate, yes, targeted rates and, targeted rates for biodiversity, for pest control, all of that, there's a nuance to that. And I think it's almost separate, the transport separate, the
and
river separate,
right?
and then other targeted rates, because there may be other targeted rates pop up in civil defence. Yeah, it's a very binary solution to something that's quite complex. So I guess what I'm saying is I think we need to be clearer about our flood management and drainage. Be very clear about that. It's just not achievable, almost full stop, for delivery of the service. And that those targeted ratepayers have mechanisms to participate and tell council what they are prepared to pay and what they're not. The other targeted rates, as they apply to other matters, there needs to be some variables in the system that accounts for it. I haven't got the answers. I don't think any of us have. Again, we're not saying unfettered funding, but there might be something else that we manage that against. That makes sense?
Does to me. Chris?
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Really just picking up on the point that Jennifer made and Ben, under Q2O, we've got examples to be inserted there. I think what we need to do, definitely pick out the water controls, river control, and we need to put in there what our processes are to ensure that the rates are agreed with the targeted rate payers. Because I think that if that's communicated to the people that are doing this, they'll understand that the decision is not regional councils, it's actually the ratepayers' decision. So if they want a better level of service, then that's what they get. If they don't want to pay for it, they don't get it. And I think we should put that in there as an example, so it's very clear, understood by those who are vetting this. So other than that, the other targeted rates, I think, need to be captured under controlled.
Thanks, Chris. Robbie? Good. Mike? Yeah.
Chris's answer there, but you got to remember that a lot of this is 20% general rated as well.
Yeah.
So how do you explain that in that conversation? That
Yep.
I think that's the bit you've all forgotten to think about at the moment,
No,
because
not
it's
at all.
still a large contributor to the whole conversation. Which then that's still inflationary. If you take some of the rate increases, it's around 27% is what Noel keeps saying. So that's still 20% on that general rate cost as well. So how do you explain that one out? I don't know if you want to go down this, but I'd actually like you to explain to the government, or in your submission, sorry, that what are the inflationary costs that we are exposed to and how great they are. If you go back last term, we had inflationary costs of around 200% on stock banks, I think it was, and construction was over 300%. So how do you keep that within and I think that some sort of, and then you got the burden cost that was inflationary as well, so there's so much going. Do they actually understand all of that? And so I think you need to, sell that, what is going on in that space.
The strong emphasis on the certain inflationary pieces that hit us, like materials, etc., that aren't. Yeah.
And I'm sure they hit PAs and roading and everything else as well, but this
Yep.
is core infrastructure that if this asset fails, those roads can't even be used.
And remember, one of those roads is State Highway 1
Well,
and a bunch of
and
others.
26 and
and
25 and
So
there's-
what we will
Who-
do is we'll try and get some of that information in the submission. It does have to go out Wednesday. So it's just, we should be able to say, hey, Greg, rustle us up some of this info and we will be able to find it. But I think those very practical examples of this is what we were dealing with will help.
And if you go back to some of the postings that the mayors have been doing on the eastern side at the moment of realising the importance of that infrastructure and what those towns and agriculture areas would look like without that infrastructure at the high level of maintenance that we put against it now, they would not be there.
That investing in infrastructure up front saves the government a whole lot of, they seem to be quite happy to splash out money at the bottom of the cliff sort of thing later on.
So same as before the deluge argued. Yeah.
Yep. Mikhail?
Yeah, I'm
my head's is about as fat as this room, I think, just with what's
wait
going
for the
on.
rest of
And honestly, I can't believe that the government or central government hasn't done their homework, and then saying, hey, and I don't disagree with a rates cap, don't get me wrong, but, 2 to 4, but to then come to us and say that it is encompass targeted rates when we look at, or whether it's, infrastructural resilience, we look at just the weather hazards that have happened over the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and, infrastructure has just been hammered. You look at some roads that are non-accessible, there was that big road to Picton or further up one way in. So has to be, the numbers just don't add up. And that's the thing that for me, that just gets it. Someone's got to pay, and where does that cost lay? If we do come in there, is it, and then we've got the government reform, as we going in unitaries and stuff like that, and you've got these TAs that all got different assets and different debts and stuff like that. So yeah, my head's just, yeah, it's really hard to read a big document like this, but then at the end of the day, it's for the rates capping, the numbers just don't add up. And I don't know, what advice to give you guys to then go, to the central government, because for me, the central government has said that they must have done some homework. They must have, because this is impossible to do if they haven't, to go down.
It's election year, Mike. Yeah, Gary. I do want to move this on, so I've got Gary and then Angela. Yeah.
I'll just be brief. To some extent, I agree with what Mikhail's just saying there, where I didn't give this submission an awful lot of attention, mainly because I think it potentially is superseded by what we do around local government and around RMA, and I think they could pass some of it. So, but by the same token, I think a frustration that I have sitting here, even listening to the conversation, and it is about revenue, where my focus always goes straight to cost. And when I listen to people like Robbie and those sort of people around drainage and flood protection, and the council can inflate a contractor's cost by 200%. I say that I can see where the government's coming from. That we've got to be smarter with our money, and so so I'd say I can absolutely see where the Crown's coming from on this, and we need to look at ourselves too on things and say we just cannot keep passing on costs. And so I think it needs to be taken into consideration how we do that and look at ourselves as well. So it's a point I'd like to add.
No. Angela.
We don't decide the rating.
Yeah, agree with a lot of what's been said so far. Yeah, just really curious about what other regional councils are proposing around PT, carving that out or not. Yeah, the whole NZTA conversation, yeah, I agree with Chris that those costs passed on, central government does need to look at what they are asking us to do, which I believe has been touched on the LGNZ submission as well. But yeah, the whole thing just seems completely unworkable, really, and forced upon us. Agree that a lot of people are hurting out there, but in my opinion, just putting up, say, PT fares, for example, isn't a viable solution. People are hurting. People have to put multiple family members on buses. They're just going to drive their cars, which causes more congestion for those who need to drive cars or vehicles. So yeah, just yeah, really interested in where this is going, but nothing new to add.
Thanks, Angela. Quickly, Robbie, did you want to say no? Ben,
just a quick one. I just think that the government is going to go ahead with this rates capping, whether we want it or not, given the fact that it's such a short time frame and they've decided it's election year.
Yes.
But what could we actually achieve? I think we could achieve getting flood protection and catchment moved as a targeted rate. I don't think you're going to get all targeted rates removed, but that's something we could. And I would certainly suggest we possibly add a photograph of Pyroa in the flood we've just had, Graham's Creek, because that's top of mind for the government at the moment. So your photo can be added.
And Pete, just picking up on Ben's point, with the reasoning behind it, that we have identified around the conversation of why it should sit outside this potential rates capping piece. So, have you got what you need now?
Yeah.
I mean, I know we've covered a lot, but I think the message is that there was a lot of similarity coming through.
But we don't have the opportunity, and that I don't circulate submissions by emails because then everybody's emails trip over one another. So we've got enough here. I think we've got direction around the targeted rates. I think it's important to go back with some principles and then some specifics, because I don't feel we have done our job to the rest of the organisation's functions where we've spoken specifically about flood protection, river management and drainage, because that's really important. But there are also a whole lot of other functions covered by targeted rates that we haven't kind of scratched the surface of, because we don't have the time to have that conversation, nor are 4 questions that are asked on 2 pages really substantive when we're talking about rates. Don't agree with the outcome, but just the way to get there. Look, I think we've got enough there to tighten it up. We will get it to Chris next week for him to sign it off, and we will send you a copy of the final submission. And as always, they'll be posted on our web anyway. So thanks, it's been really helpful. It was a real challenge, this one, to be fair. Yep.
I don't know how you thought you were going to get through it any quicker, but anyway.
Well, government's trying to get things very
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah.
We're trying to emulate them, not at all.
Yep.
Thank
So it's coming out to Chris. Is it also coming across my desk?
No, this one's solely delegated authority, probably to Chris, but yep, we can swoosh it past your desk on the way. Not a worry.
Thank you. Thank you, Brooke.
Okay.
Well
Thanks,
done.
Brooke, you survived. Thanks, Blair
Yeah.
and Janine,
You
because
can tell them
I was
upstairs
going
what
to
a
ask
sponge we
answer
are.
rates. Okay. Thank you. So, councillors, just so you know, I've done what I usually do, taken the conversation, listen to the entirety of the conversation, but taking those key points as takeaways. We'll do that for each of these. For local government and RM, you'll see your comments reflected in the next iteration of the submissions. So, Brooke, if we could toggle along, next slide. Righty-ho, and we've got Miffy and Sydney, some of our new councillors. Yes, this is Sydney. Sydney has been a policy advisor with us for a few years now. Sydney has been the submission wrangler across the organisation for the Simplifying Local Government submission. I think, again, a 20-page consultation document is a little bit of a thin document upon which to talk about the future of local government in the Waikato. So as much as we could have written probably 20 times what you've got here, we did respond to what is in the document. Next to Sydney is Miffy, who's our team leader. I think you would have bumped into Miffy this trinium or not? No. There you go. So Miffy and Sydney, and I will take you through this. Some of the comments that we had in the rates submission are equally as applicable, if not more so, in this part. Definitely we'll pick up the transport issues here. Over to Sydney and Brooke in terms of driving us through the PowerPoint.
So once again, well, questions at the end.
Please.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good morning. Hello to the councillors I haven't yet met. As Tracy has said, I'm Sydney. I'm a policy advisor on the policy implementation team. So yeah, I've coordinated the research and analysis for the submission on the Department of Internal Affairs draft proposal for simplifying local government. So this is not yet a bill or a policy, it's a draft proposal intended to generate public discussion. So the next stages will be February 2026, rapid review of regional council roles and functions. Then we've got our submission due date on February the 20th for this draft proposal. March 2026, the ministers report back to Cabinet with a final proposal and preliminary view on any transfer or cessation of regional council functions. Mid-2026, legislation introduced and referred to Select Committee. Mid-2027, legislation enacted. So the draft proposal is set out in 3 different key areas. We've got Part A as background, Part B, simplifying regional governance, Part C, improving local government, Part D, Treaty of Waitangi and Māori representation. So basically, the government is proposing to simplify local government in 2 steps. The step 1 is mayors will replace regional councillors. The government has also proposed the appointment of Crown Commissioners appointed by the government and is consulting on what level of involvement these commissioners may have on leading the board. And then step 2, the Board of Mayors will develop future focused plans for how the councils in the region can work together more effectively and efficiently. These plans are called regional reorganisational plans and will be developed after consultation with communities, examined independently and be approved by the government. Change the slide.
Sorry, I've just kidnapped the slideshow.
I'll carry on.
To,
That's okay.
Sorry, everybody's
No
going,
worries.
what's going on? Just to show councillors, I'll just take this opportunity, Sydney.
Yeah.
Just to show councillors that we have generated for you, much like we did. It's a work in progress, but comms have generated for us for each of the proposals that we're going through the timeline. So we will have for you, for Stratton Pole, a timeline that has the RM reform, the local government reform, the rates capping reform. What else have we got? National direction or lack thereof, Climate Change Response Act and levies, funding and financing, rates capping, water services, and we should have Phil's transport program planned out. So we've got it. I didn't want to go through all of this because it's all as we took you through the annual plan, so you can see how things build. Just to say it's quite a lot. Why it's important to see it all laid out is the local government proposals and the RM proposals, the rating proposals, just that we got the sequencing and timing right. You'll see in our submissions, we don't think so. So I'll unkidnap and give it back to you.
Cool. So the main theme for simplification of local government is summarised as making mayors work together for the benefit of your region. The proposal puts forward the creation of the Combined Territories Board, or the CTB. Under this model, there will not be 2 separate sets of elected councillors for the same area. The CTB would take over all the regional councils' roles and obligations until step 2 is complete. Overall, we've so far answered the approximately 10 consultation questions. There's not many more than that. Our submission endeavours to answer all the questions asked. They're based around the questions are based around what we like, what we dislike, what level of Crown participation and regional decision making is wanted. Questions around proportionality of voting, representation queries, cross-boundary interests, and an opportunity to provide feedback on iwi Māori interests and utility arrangements. We had another slide, but that's okay. It's not really that necessary. The main themes of feedback provided to the government revolve around the following themes. Yeah, that one. Cool. So on the slide, uniqueness, complexity of the Waikato, continued level of service for communities, integrated approach to reform, sufficient resourcing from central government, focus on transitional arrangements, iwi Māori participation and upholding true scale management. So as noted in point 4 of our submission, we don't currently have a position of unanimous support or opposition on the CTB. The submission agrees with the simplifying of local government, but we can't yet offer a structural solution as we need a lot more context, conversation and consultation. So we look forward to hearing your feedback on how you would like this submission shaped. In particular, we would like to know your thoughts around the response to question 9, which is what do you think about the criteria proposed for assessing regional reorganisation plans? The answer we currently have is that we request clarity on the sequencing of the review of regional council functions described on page 7 and page 19 of the draft proposal. Page 7 states this review will occur before CTBs are established, whereas on page 19 it suggests it will occur before the CTBs develop reorganisational proposals. This difference is important as the sequencing affects the ongoing delivery of regional council functions and services. Clear communication will be required for our ratepayers. Yeah, and I've received some good points raised by Councillor Dunbar-Smith. It looks like your thoughts are generally aligned with our submission direction, but you've also raised some extra good points that we haven't included. So yeah.
Questions, Ben?
Well, it's basically the submission's been drafted without having discussion with councillors, and so we've had some informal discussions, a number of us, over the time period. And as Chris said earlier, I think we should be more bullish about basically we agree that they need to simplify, that we recognise there'll be no council elections after 2028, so we're not saying it shouldn't happen at all, but that the workload that they're imposing on the mayors is enormous, and the mayors know that. We've been speaking to the mayors. Mikhail's been spending his holidays with the mayor down in Taupo, and the mayor is sinking under the workload, and the mayor's never signed up for this. So I think it's something that Warren will give us feedback on, and I notice Karen's not here today, but obviously the mayoral forum's got some views on this. What Warren had found from discussions with DIA, as I understand it, is the government is interested in moving towards regional reorganisation, but it's willing to have different models in different areas, depending on the complexity. So we need to explain why we're complex and difficult. And that's some of the work in here on the catchment stuff does that, and also treaty settlements. But one model is that we could fund the CTB and a commissioner if necessary to look at regional reorganisation, while at the same time continuing to manage the governance of the regional council until the October 2028 election. And so that gives us something to do. And in that period, we could start work on it, looking at the CCO for flood protection and possibly transport. So it gives the government some indication of what we would be working on. Flood protection works well because it's something that's within the regional council remit. It's our targeted ratepayers. The transport stuff would actually need to work with the other TAs on that, but it shows them a model. And from what I can understand from Warren, and perhaps you can comment next on where you got to, but there is a possibility of making a strong submission because the government doesn't really know what it's doing yet, but it's going to do it very fast. So we need to make a strong submission. My concern with the current one is that our current council doesn't have a position of municipal. There's a whole lot of things in here that could be revised that presumably we can have a decision today on whether we have support or opposition to where we're at, that we can redefine that now.
So we can have a conversation and give a direction of those councillors present, but we can't have a decision.
True, but we've got time to work on this prior to the 10th of February.
The agenda goes out on the 3rd or 4th, so 2 days. That's the whole purpose of this workshop, to get as much as possible. But the 10th of February is where we have another conversation about it, and it can definitely have a further conversation there. You will see a revised version for sure.
When I go through the submission as it is, diversity of opinion on proposal, continued level of service, most of the comments here, I don't think pose a sufficient alternative model and don't really provide direction.
If I can be really clear, that staff did not have that writing instruction to propose a model at all, and neither had this council had the conversation. That's why it's like that. Yeah.
Precisely, yes.
And I think it's a bit cute to the government asking for that within the time that
Oh, absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely.
But there are, again, one thing I would say, don't have a problem with doing that if it's the want of the majority of council, but principles as well as outcomes. So there might be some things, as you mentioned, Ben, talking about a CCO for X and Y, but the principles, the why we're proposing that must be principles applied across looking at all our functions. So as long as we've captured those principles and those other bits, then go for it.
I'll just go to Chris before you carry on, Ben. Comment.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I hadn't realised you'd put something in front of us along the lines of what you'd.
Oh, it's just last night, that's all.
Yeah. So I guess my comment is, I think it's quite helpful in the sense of you're reinforcing some principles around that. Maybe we think that the regional council representation should be involved in the discussions of what future of local government looks like in the Waikato. It's the fact that it's adding to the idea that it's complex arrangements in the Waikato, and but where I'm a little bit concerned about is jumping to a form ahead of all the discussions where the government's proposal is that a combined territorial board has this discussion about what the form is like. Now, it's in our mandate, it's in our rights to be able to propose one, as you're suggested, but I do think we need to take our mayoral forum partners along if we're going to.
So you're talking a form around functions.
Yeah, like setting up
like
CPOs around
DCO,
functions.
yeah.
The other comment I'd just make around it is if you did want to go down that path, I think we've got to start saying, well, what's in, what's out, because I see this stuff around flood management and catchment management, and I think that's very sensible, but then it talks about schemes, which is different to catchment management and everything we do in that space. Water management is, I talk about the Waikato as being quite complex because you've got to manage water allocation and point of view, you've got to manage energy, and you've got to manage flood management all in the one go. And so I think isolating one thing out into we're jumping to the form without considering all the functions could take you down a path you might not want to be in. So all I'm saying is that I agree with the principle of being more bullish. I agree with the principle of suggesting maybe elected members should be passed out a term and have more input into the future of what local government looks like. There might be other models that councillors think about how that should be arranged going forward. I just do wonder if we should just jump to one.
Right, it was simply to provide something that we could be seen to be doing that was not the CTB. So the idea was that we would not be looking at the regional reorganisation, that was something for the CTBs and the mayors, where a chair might sit alongside that, but the reorganisation stuff was done separate from what the current run-of-the-mill council work was. But Warren, you had feedback on where you got to?
Yeah, so I'll jump in now. Did you want to comment on this just before I start?
No, just clarity on something Ben said. I can come just to make sure I've kept pays.
Yeah, I think one of the things Ben is trying to articulate too is the fact that we've been voted in. There's various mandates that we are carrying on with business as usual. We are looking for those efficiencies already, and part of and I wouldn't say setting up a CCO, but certainly investigating a CCO. This work being done in that sort of space. So it's practical examples which I always think are really positive in a submission. So that just talking to that. So where we got to with the Mayoral Forum, as you heard Chris outline earlier, they are supportive of myself sitting on that CTB. They have various opinions around commissioners. So that's something that we can have input into. I think as a generalisation, I would say that they are accepting of a commissioner because it gives government oversight that things are happening. You know, it's that direct line back into government that this reorganisation process is proceeding, and that side of it. It also gives you that direct line back. DIA staff have also indicated that they are to be made readily available to the CTB, to help them work through that process. I'll just quickly run through some key messages that are being redefined that came out of that. So, and I just headline it. So basically, number one was Waikato region is complex, unique in the local government terms. We support the intent of the reforms. The Waikato region has a strong track record of working together. So we're all aware of the number of organisations that have had both district and regional councils on, both within the Waikato and then also across larger regions as well. The introduction of this program to reform has somewhat minimised the partnership between central government and local government. Where are we? Iwi partners in the role of Treaty of Waitangi are critical to the success and keeping them as part of the discussions. This is a once in a generation opportunity. The purpose of local authorities is to do the things that their communities want of them and to do what they are prepared to pay for. That obviously we spoke about that in the rates capping stuff. Unfundated mandates in some areas and the erosion of Crown contributions in others has undermined financial stability over an extended period. The Forum advocates for local government to access additional funding from central government to help progress these changes. Transitioning to a new system of local government and resource management is complex and resource intensive. And to simplify local government, we need to look at the whole system of government. Resource management must reflect urban and rural interests, catchment scale needs and treaty settlement arrangements, and investment must be made by central government in standardisation and streamlining. So they are some of the key messages. We built on those through the meeting, and I don't have the outcomes of those with me. So that's a little bit of an outline of where the mayors are thinking. They have definitely articulated capacity issues, I think, which is well known, and some want to get going with the reorganisation stuff right now, and that whether they appoint externals to help them with that process. The information we got from DIA was a little bit like that's the cart before the horse. Obviously, the submission needs to be broken down to look at what format the CTB may take, and also then how do they handle the facilities, the functions that we do now as regional councillors. So that is, again, coming back to what our terms might look like as councillors moving forward in that space, completely separate to starting the work on what reorganisation might look like. They have no idea what a unitary may look like, whether it's 1, 2 or 3, whether it's none, whether there's some amalgamation of councils, but not all, etc., etc. So that thinking hasn't even started with those mayors, but they are obviously all patch protective, and they don't want, as mentioned, they don't want to lose that rural voice to an urban voice, etc. Voting around the mayors that were there, and there were, I think, 4 that were absent due to the storm that was going on, maybe 3, I think there was 1 online. But again, they want to make sure those voices come through, but they're not sure what that structure may even look like. So it's slowly coming together, but that I know there's a lot of information missing out of that, but there's a lot of information that hasn't been finalised either. So I hope that helps a little bit. And Chris, I don't know whether you wanted to add anything.
That's absolutely correct what you say. There was a push to say, well, let's get on, let's do it now, and let's get it do it as soon as possible. But that got a bit of pushback.
Yeah.
Yes, they want to think this through carefully for them. And I'll just go back on the back of it. I think that I think that what we don't want to do is give a surprise to the mayoral thing to jump ahead.
Yeah.
And I think that these type of ideas, the question is that Ben's put to us, do we actually want to put so proactively, we're thinking about this now, and put that into a submission so the government knows we are. But that will come attitude in that space. This is, we discuss why we want to be involved, because it's really important, the regional council functions and activities. We need to be involved in that, and then we just do that. So I think that's the question.
Yeah.
Submission or not.
Yeah, and there's probably four things I took out of it that all the mayors were across. That they want a smooth transition. First and foremost, cost effective and efficient transmission, democratic. You've got that piece of democratically based, so that all representation is across that. So that are an overlining headlines as such, and then it's working within that space. So happy to move back to questions because there is a number of them. So Mikhail.
Sorry, Warren.
Oh, sorry.
If I can just grab clarification. So, Ben, you said that we could fund the establishment of the CTB and an independent commissioner at the same time as undertaking our existing functions. I just wanted to make sure we've captured that. Because I think there's a conversation there we need to unpack.
Rating implication. Basically, it's saying
Ratings cap as well as a savings drive. Where and how do we fund it?
yeah. Well, I mean, the government's proposal at the moment is there is no new money.
Correct.
The regional council salaries, 900,000 whatever it is,
Yep.
pays for the CTB established, the commissioner if there is one, and the mayors to actually spend extra time. So if you're going to continue with the regional councillors till 2028, you need to find an alternative mechanism funding a commissioner or mayors to attend.
And you're saying that that should be covered by the regional council?
Well, who else is going to put their hands up?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm just saying, you can't go back to central government and say, we want money to do this if we're providing an alternative mechanism. So presumably it would come out of cost savings.
Their idea to do all the whole changes, so.
and sorry.
So
Okay, yep. I just needed to understand your thinking on that. And Warren, in terms,
no, it's not a majority view. It's just an opinion.
We're
That's all.
discussing.
So-
We've only just started now.
just understand. Just we need to understand. Of, in a model post the transition, and just hearing and kind of what's going to come, because we could dream up quite the fruit salad of what things could be, but whether there are some preferred models that we indicate or preferred some guidance that we indicate, noting the mayoral forum conversations, but also noting there might be some things that we don't support. 100% commissioners. That's probably something that the flavour of the mayoral forum and around this table is saying not something we'd support. So I think I wouldn't put it as a headline part of the submission, but that we have given it some thought for what's best for provide the ongoing level of service to our ratepayers and kind of couch it like that. That's kind of what I'm playing with at the moment.
Yeah, I think, Tracy, the focus is on that transition and how that works rather than what reorganisation and what that looks like.
Personally, I'm quite terrified that some of our regional scale issues might get lost. And that's what we've got to ensure. Yeah.
And it's that institutional knowledge that we want to make sure is still held and captured.
Carried through.
Sorry, Mikhail.
Yeah, the big thing for me is the time frame. To do those 7 submission points, the time frame is impossible. So I think that should be a submission point as well. Is the time frame that the government's given for all this to be done. And it's a must that we've got to have regional council represent the chairman on whatever the park commissioners, and then on that but we need representation from this council on that board to do it. But yeah, the big thing for me is the time frame. I just don't think even if we're given an extension to the 3 years, the end of our term, and just don't believe that we can even achieve it that time frame. You know, you look at the two unitaries in New Zealand are both 1 TAs. You know, Gisborne and Tasman. This is, I mean, Auckland, 120 million, 10 years to do. And then you look at even that up there, the rural communities are forgotten about. You know, you know, when that trip that we went up there, you know, and this is much more complex, or I think it is, you know, when you look at the, you know, even the weather events and, you know, and then different TAs, as I said before, with their assets and their debt and stuff like that. Yeah, the time frame is a big point for me in this.
So just picking on Mikhail's points, Tracy, I think for me too, that the timeframes on what is within our own work plan as well, like the annual plan, the LTP, you know, to me, it makes, exactly outlining that, you know, the end of our financial year sort of thing, that to me is a cut-off point, and whether that's the end of the financial year 2028 sort of thing, which means that, those elections after that, there's some new structure, fine. But I think if we can articulate just how we work within our financial timeframes too, is a piece of it.
And I think, I mean, without labouring the events of the last week, you know, you only need a few of those events for some of our TA mayors, because they are pointed towards their community. That's what they must focus on. That's just going to further impede our ability to deliver within the time frame. And that's only weather. That's not other things that just pop up. Yep.
Jen.
Thanks. Stepping back a bit, I have the question, like, do we value local government? And I don't see it in New Zealand being valued. And then the next question I often come to in my mind, and I'm trying to get my thoughts right, is, do we value independent local government? And that, I think, is also not currently, it's a no from what I see coming from central government. And so I'm interested in the Mayoral Forum making some points you mentioned around, you know, minimising the partnership and wanting to look at the whole system of government. I'd be interested to see in the submission how that comes through in more detail. Because I think we should keep pushing for that, keep pushing to actually fix local government and have it work the way it works in many other countries, which is something we hardly ever look at, something Peter McKinley keeps bringing up and we had in our previous papers. Because at the moment it feels like local government is kind of in the hospital with a flu out of neglect of many decades, and it's about to go into ICU after some band-aid solutions that are not, to Blair's earlier point on the other submission, not really addressing the core issues. So it's a similar set of mentioning there, but to get more specific, because we have to get a response to this submission, I want it to be really clear that I think democratically, the regional council should see out the 3-year term. Don't mind what happens October 2028. That's fine to be worked out, but the people put us in, the process should finish as they expected. It's the same for the mayors to not take on regional council responsibilities until then. Happy for them to learn all about us in that time frame, because then they can campaign on, they can prepare themselves for, and do that work. So I just would like that to come through really clearly. That just upholds the intention of independent local government, as opposed to just messing around with things in between those 3 yearly dates, which really are not that far away in the grand scheme of changes in government in general. And then I really want that point to come through, that if there is a CTB and the mayors are responsible for regional responsibilities, that there is no delegation there. Because if there is delegation to other council members, there will be no accountability for what happens there, because those delegations get shuffled around throughout the term and people don't know who's going to get that job. So I'd like that to come through.
Can you just clarify that?
Yeah.
By that job, are you meaning
Regional council.
Regional council
Government.
say, okay, so a Hamilton City Councillor appearing in a Stratton Poll meeting. Sort of, is that the
Yeah,
type
yeah,
of thing?
so
that's
I'm
talking
all
about?
for joint committees. That's fine because that's working anyway. But you know, where you have all the TAs kind of meeting up and giving like working group advice, etc. But the mayor has to be the person accountable under this model that they've proposed, so that the people voting can hold that person to account for the decisions that they've made under their regional responsibility.
For councillors, just to be clear, so DIA tell us that the expectation is that the mayors they could delegate that
Good.
role onto a combined
That's
territorial
what the
board.
proposal says, that the mayors are able to delegate to somebody else, which is something that we are nervous about, because you will likely get the councillor who has the most capacity, who generally
We've seen that in the
isn't
joint
the one
committee.
who's
Yeah.
been deployed on other things.
Yes.
You give a good job to a busy person if you want it done. So yeah.
And so how do you as a voter vote for the person you want to have in the regional
It's the mayor.
responsibilities?
Yeah.
It can only be the mayor unless you create other roles. So anyway, it's just the point of, because otherwise it will really get lost. The that is, and in regards to commissioners, yeah, it just comes back to how much it sounded like the mayoral forum just wants them in an observational and conduit capacity. I can totally understand that. But anything further than that, I think takes away the intention of local government, and you may as well put those functions into a central government department. Because if they want the control, put it into a central government department, stop fluffing around with councillors. So and that comes back to the other point about look at the whole system of government, that whole functions and where everything sits, and any level of government in this country needs a good look. So welcome that in future as a discussion.
Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Warren. Yeah, I guess my first comment is that I found our submission was a little bit adversarial, and I don't agree with that. But the government has set a direction of travel which we must follow, and I think we must do everything in our powers to achieve it within the timelines that they're establishing. And I accept that they're very tight. Us criticising them ain't going to change them. So I think we just have to accept that that's the pack of cards we've been dealt. That's what we've got to play with. We've got to make the best of it. Just going back to Ben's proposal, I'm largely in support of it, but I'm a great believer in not trying to reinvent the wheel. There are people who have actually been through this process previously, and we only got to look north to Auckland, and it wasn't a huge success, and it's still a work in progress. But there's a lot being learned out of that process, and I personally would like to see somebody. There was 3 people involved in that, and one of them has offered to come and spend a day with us to help us map out a plan for the future of this region in terms of how do you make it, how do you put it together, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 different organisations. But we can use the benefit of experience and hindsight to assist us with this process, and I believe that is key to the whole. Any changes have to be planned, and if they can be planned based on somebody else's experience, then you're ahead of the 8 ball to start with. Well, that's my personal belief anyway. So there'll be lots of do's and don'ts, and I don't want us to go down the pathway of doing the don'ts and then learning the hard way to didn't work, so we'll have to go another path.
So Chris, can I just pick up on your point then? So are you looking at, say, an external that's been involved with the Auckland Super City coming down and looking at our functions once we find out from DIA what they may still be and what may remain and what may go, to streamline our organisation? Or are you talking to work towards the reorganisation?
The organisation of the region.
Yeah,
that's really what I'm talking about.
So which is something potentially the CTB has the oversight of.
Yes, correct.
So
yeah.
So it's a timing on when you would involve someone like that.
It's bringing somebody in to act as an advisor to that.
No, it's just for clarity on, yeah.
So yeah, look, and the other point I'd like to make is that I think our submission needs to be black and white. I don't like grey. I think we need to take a position on things. need to have, heart to say, this is where we want to go, this is the direction of travel we want, and we can then drive that. But leaving it grey means you're giving the politicians the opportunity of driving it, and that, to me, is undesirable. In terms of timelines, I'm totally relaxed. I'd have it done yesterday if I could, but nobody else is going to try and do that. Ben wants to spread it out for the next 10 years. That's fine. That's not going to happen either. So, yeah, I'm happy with 2028 as being drop dead date. Not literally.
Thanks, Chris. Gary.
I think back to Tipper's comment at the end of last year, and she said she didn't want to be a trailer on anybody else's truck, and I thought it was a really good little phrase. And so, by and large, I support some of the comments, Chris, Ben, what you're saying, and what Ben's saying. So, I don't believe that we can actually dot the I's and cross the T's. So general thrust of what Ben's saying, you got to say is the right thing. It's actually given some direction. It's outlined some plan, and I suppose if we're going to be the truck, not the trailer, then we need to start doing that. And so I'm supportive of what you put there, Ben, and it's positive. It's actually stating something. Whether it's 100% right, 100% wrong is, to my mind, immaterial, but it's a direction of travel. And I also firmly believe that if you start the conversation, then people will talk around that point. But if we don't put a conversation out there, put something out there, then the conversation will drift off in all other directions. So it's actually getting something in place that we can actually have a discussion around and build on from that point on. So I think it's important that, and I'm supportive of what you've done, Ben.
Thanks, Gary. Angela.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, probably just echo a few of those thoughts, Gary, around, thanks to staff and Ben for your thoughts and your submission so far. Just wanted to get some clarity. We're sort of talking about commissioners observing. Are we sort of talking Crown Observer rather than commissioners?
So you would have seen in what the legislation proposed put out was various options around commissioners, Crown appointed, yes. And then also around their voting right, potential voting rights as well. On the CTB, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So just to help councillors, the options were none. You don't have any Crown participation, Crown participation / commissioners. So none, only mayors, a Crown commissioner non-voting, Crown commissioner with veto power, a Crown commissioner that holds a majority vote, or a Crown commissioners instead of a CTB. Those are the options.
Okay, no, that provides some clarity. I guess where we got to last year, I would be in favour of obviously having our chair on with the CTB and the mayors as well. And to Ben's points around, seeing out our term, and Jen, you touched on this as well with, we've been elected for the whole term, so makes sense that we would carry on. Around the CCOs, maybe just change some of that wording to investigate, as suggested by Warren. But I guess my mind, and the other thing, I don't want to pay for anyone else. This is the Crown's idea, so they should come through with the money. If regardless of whether we're here or not. But and just on that democratic, did we get any legal advice around, I know there was some talk about whether it was legal for them to, we've been democratically elected.
I think the information that was alluded to was there are 2 pieces of legislation that they would have to change to have us removed. And that is just a parliamentary process.
Okay.
So they can actually, separate to bringing commissioners in because of bad behaviour. There is 2 pieces of legislation in the Local Government Act that would need to be changed through Parliament to allow our removal.
And in addition to that, the government has indicated that if Cabinet makes decisions to do so, they would have in front of the House in term, but it would not be completed
Okay.
So more to come before that could happen.
Yeah, which gives you obviously we now know the general elections on November the 7th.
Mm.
So it means that, yeah, that legislation passing isn't going to happen in this year.
Yeah.
The last day of government sits 24th of September.
Yeah.
So basically 6 to 7 months to push through what they need to do.
All the other legislation.
Everything else.
Yeah, they're ambitious. And then just lastly, I suppose, again, to Jen's points as well, looking at the timeframes till the next election, acknowledging, that we probably won't be here, but yeah, just that next step as well, which I suppose the Mayoral Forum and the CTB will be looking at. Yeah, it just seems really messy the way that the whole restructuring is being done, because it's, we're not just an outlier, I suppose. Everything is connected. And yeah, I guess, just not enough thought has really gone on to the layers of local government and that functions. And yeah, it just doesn't really make sense to me. I'll leave it there.
Angela, no.
Well, I apologise for lateness.
Apology accepted.
It's fine. And so therefore, I'm not sure that I'm going to speak out of turn of things that you may have already covered. One of the issues for me when I started reading the submission or draft, I wondered whether submission was really close to reality. And I think it's too expensive to needs to be cut down and short and sharp. Easy to do because it's easier to write a novel than it is a short story, I'm told. So the long and the short of it for me is, thanks for this, Ben. I've only had a few moments to read it, but it's in line with the discussion that some of us had earlier this month. And I want to see things, we get on and do things rather than be reactive to what someone else tells us. So I don't care whether I'm here or I'm not. I've come to that view in recent days. Insofar as I had a very long meeting with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor at Waikato earlier this week. I got the stuff from the forum, went through that, got another paper that Axel's written where he thinks we should go. And throughout the conversation, and I'm hopefully not taking this out of context, but the reality is I don't trust a CTB made up of the region's mayors to actually achieve anything significant, because they've all got self-interest, and that's coming through quite clearly. And the region, I'm just listening here now, self-interest, we want to get to the end of the term because we were elected for 3 years. The reality is change needs to happen, and let's get on with it. And we can talk our way through 3 years and achieve nothing. So unless I see that sort of thing, I'm just becoming disenfranchised or whatever the word is. So it's time to stop talking. I accept staff are here to give us advice, but it's over to the councillors around this table to get on and make some decisions and not be told what to do by anybody. Thanks for the advice. Want to see things happen. Our community is telling us they want things to happen.
So can I get some clarification, Noel? So you want things to happen within this organisation as in reference to what you've been elected for?
Yeah,
is that what you're speaking to?
Yep. And so the likes of moving the rivers, drainage, those sort of things out of the council to a CCO or a body corporate or whatever. The government signalled those sort of issues. Let's get on and start consulting with people, because whatever happens, it's going to happen anyway. Let's create something that the community wants, not what they're given. That for me is what we're here to do, is we represent the community's interests, not governments, not individual mayors with self-interest. So let's get on with it. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure what the point of that conversation was. Are you telling us that you'd like us to put in a submission to government that we we don't care what you're doing, we're going to do our own thing. So you've criticised the submission as being too lengthy and it could be a lot shorter, and said you want to do this. Look, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just trying to work out what you're saying for the submission purpose for the feedback of today.
Whether my comments go on the submission, I don't really care. The issue for me is we need to get on and do things. And, you know, I'm not worried whether I'm here in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. The issue is reform needs to happen. But let's focus on, you know.
Okay, so, yeah, I think we understand where you're coming from, Noel, and my only comment around that would be, well, if we do our full term, we can achieve a lot more. Liz.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we're mostly aligned. My only comment is that probably don't underestimate the level of anxiety that the mayors have right now. I mean, this is a pretty big task, and they're working through the Waikato Waters creation, and that they're under immense pressure to deliver that before July. There's just the time. They don't have enough hours in their day, I don't think. For us, we want an ordered, organised transition. You know, and how do we achieve that? And our best influence actually is probably placed with the councils, and influencing at that level. So I don't know how much influence we have on their submissions, but we've all got connections with them. So it's understanding what their, where's their biggest level of anxiety. Our biggest threat is, and I think someone said it already, is that regional scale issues will get lost. And that's where I think Noel's point was as well, and that sometimes people are protective of that patch, but how do we deliver a regional solutions going forward? So it's just a matter of just maybe emphasising that in our submission. Agree with Chris wholeheartedly around don't get in the detail right now. Don't be suggesting too much unless it's with the blessing of the Mayoral Forum and the CTB, because otherwise we just end up on different paths. So those are just my comments.
Thanks, Liz. Ben.
Yeah. So just to summarise, so a couple of points. We have 96 meetings a year and 48 workshops, and at the current model, the mayors are supposed to attend those or have a delegated person who attends on their behalf. At the same time, they have their own mayoral council meetings to attend to. At the same time, they also have to do the regional spatial plan initiation and also attend CTB meetings to reorganise the region. The workload there is very significant, and I think we should mention in our report that there are 96 of our meetings, et cetera, that need. All of that is to be funded from the regional council salaries to do. It's unclear whether commissioners would be funded by central government under this model or by regional councils.
Yeah, I don't think the expectation is.
Precisely. So that's all coming out of the same pool.
Being a bureaucrat.
Which is why I was suggesting in here, if they want, the model was to simply say, take that 96 meeting out of the agenda for the mayors and let it carry on. Meanwhile, as Noel pointed out, we can look at this, investigate the reorganisation process. One point that hasn't been mentioned is the $100 million investment fund, that hopefully that gets ring fenced so it can't be used by mayors as a sugar rush, reduce their rates within a short time frame. Hopefully our submission can actually influence the DIA, who will be working with us individually. And if we don't make a submission, so what I'm saying is, let's support the idea of simplification. I think what Chris is saying here, but let's not be grey. I think that item number 4, diversity of opinion on proposal, should go. Because it's saying.
But you specifically asked for it at your first workshop on this.
No, because we didn't.
We can make it go.
We didn't have an opinion then. So I had to write this at 9 o'clock last night to get around to circle. So we haven't had a chance to have a meeting, but basically don't push against the government. Just say we support the idea of simplification, and there's no elections for council after 2028. We can agree on those 2 points.
Can I just test something? And I do want to test it. If we get a new government and they say we want to complicate local government based on we shouldn't be pushing against the government, would we then go, okay, we want to complicate local government? And I am being purposely provocative because
Yes,
I,
it's quite possible, yes.
you know, the fact that we're saying, no, the government's telling us we've got to do this, that's fine, but the government doesn't pay for the services we provide, our ratepayers do. And if we pitch and sway with the government, so and I'm not for 1 minute saying I don't agree with simplifying local government.
Yep.
But again, just coming back to what are those principles that must be adhered to, as opposed to, yes, we agree with what the government is saying should happen.
So what I'm saying is we agree with simplifying local government, but we've got concerns about the timeframes, the ability to deliver,
Right, okay,
I mean,
that helps. Yeah.
Waitomo and merging with Otahonga is a logical thing that we would probably support if they could agree to do it.
I think the key is, Ben, is we don't want to go down into that detail.
No,
we
no,
we
no.
don't want to suggest
No.
models. We don't want to suggest amalgamation or anything like that.
No,
We want to answer the questions that have been asked of us with the reference to why we think that way, timeframes, etc. Yes, we want efficiencies. Everyone wants efficiencies. We were voted in on it, basically. All that, and we want a smooth transition and that sort of thing. So those are the things. Capacity, concern around capacities, and that will come through all the mayoral submissions, including the mayoral forum. They all have capacity issues, etc., and really don't know how they're going to manage this. So the more help they have in that space from regional council, obviously, will be the better.
So to Chris's original point, I think we should be stronger rather than less. That's all.
And black and white. Yep.
Yep.
Can I respond to Tracy's question?
Too polite.
Chris?
Yeah, look, I just want to go back and address a couple of things that Ben continually seems to want to overlook. Talking about the mayors being overworked. I know they're still working on this, but they're going to lose between 30 and 40% of their actual business with Water's Done Well. That's a fact. That's happening. End of July this year, it's all gone. Their chief executives will be doing that. The mayors are not doing it. The mayors will have nothing to do. They'll be sitting there with a business which has shrunk by 40%. So they'll be looking for something to keep them saying, I don't care. This is a fact, all right? And they need to get their heads around that. As far as the payments are concerned to the CTB, I said, like the mayoral forum, they do that at the moment of the goodness of their hearts. It's part of their job. That's their responsibility. And the CTB will be as well. And if it's not, well, then I guess we'll be booted out and they'll take our money. So to me, it's QED because that's the way of the world. It's not, I don't want to make it more complex than it is. We just have to accept that this needs to be done. The government's mandated it, and we just have to do it in the most efficient way possible.
Yeah.
Thanks. I wanted to answer Tracy's question, but just briefly, I agree with Chris's point. I don't think we should get into who pays the CTB. I think the mayoral forum is the CTB to me, and it is part of their job to work together. But I fundamentally disagree with just going along with the government of the day, and I disagree, to answer Tracy's question, with simplifying local government in the way that has been proposed, because I don't think it actually simplifies local government. There's not that many people that even stand for this council or regional council in general, so that's the one thing that they've talked about simplifying. Everything else to me is actually getting more complicated. So I agree with the intention of simplifying so that our communities can understand what we do, but I don't think getting rid of regional councillors is the answer, and hence I don't actually agree with getting rid of regional councillors at this point. There are conversations that our mayoral forum have also said needs to happen about whole of government, all the functions, and why do other countries, almost all of them, have more than one layer of local government? There's a reason generally for it, and it's the catchments versus the local things you care about. So I think there should be regional councillors or something going forward rather than one level. And I just wanted to get that on record because we get confused between I agree with simplifying local government and agreeing with the proposal. So definitely don't agree with the proposal, but I understand that it's likely to happen if this government gets back in, and hence have been making comments to try and make it the best possible thing, such as retaining accountability if it is mayors. Thanks.
Right, thanks, Jen. I'll go to Robbie. Then I've got a couple of quick comments just around the conversation I had with Karakia, and then I think we'll take a 10-minute break if that works with you, Tracy. Yeah. So Robbie.
So there's all this other smoke and mirrors going on in the room, but the only thing you'll get out of TAs is shared services. That's their first step of what they want to accomplish. So our submission should be around that. We are going to provide help and get them to that place as quick as possible. Once they get to there, they'll be able to, unless we decide that we want to take the next step really quickly, that will inform of where unitaries go to, because it's the first step to that spot. Or I think that's where we should be. We understand all of the region and how they could share services much better with their discharges or whatever, and consents, and like all that's going to save money when they work together to do a catchment consent. And that's where we should say we have the knowledge and the ability to show these councils where they can save shitloads of money if we work together to provide direction and travel. I hope that makes them, because that's where, right here and now, that's the only place that we can lower costs to these TAs. All the rest is future stuff that could be done in 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years. But this is where we could save money to ratepayers right now.
Just Robbie, so that's shared services where the councils are still arranged as they're arranged, but it's the services that are provided that should happen in the shared service, which we've got an entity that should be doing that right now.
Yeah.
So part of it might be also looking at what are the impediments.
It's also
to that.
Some of those TAs have got drainage networks and stuff like that we could say you should have a overwhelming consent over all of this catchment, that these are all covered, that you haven't got individual consents. All of these things need to be discussed when these TAs start talking shared services. It's just not
So I think the point to take out of that is our institutional knowledge can help with those frameworks. They've started with their waters, and so our value is in that institutional knowledge on region-wide functions, and we still, without knowing what's going to come out of central government on what functions may be taken away from us or added to TAs. Yep.
Otherwise, where are they going to save money?
I just wanted to thank Sydney and Tracy. It's really difficult to write this when councillors themselves haven't even had a chance to discuss it and provide an opinion. So I had to write something at 9 o'clock last night to get out to others to think about. Well done on that. Yep.
So I had a conversation with Karakia. Obviously, she can't be here today due to a funeral in the family, but basically asking her how her thoughts around the simplifying local government, her communities, and iwi. So paraphrasing, basically they stay and I use they as a generalisation across the community and iwi, obviously having discussions themselves with government and working what those things might look like. They are worried, like we are, with the loss of the partnership structure and that sort of thing, and the terms around equity and things that will be equitable from what is there now to what may be there in the future. And so they are just looking to dig deeper into it, to understand more about it, and they're also concerned about what will be left of Waikato Regional Council's functions in that space. So that's just an outline from what Karakia and I spoke about. Briefly, she's raised a lot of the things that have been raised around the room today, concerns and just that unknown.
And if I could just not on the iwi front, but we've also had other sectors and big players in our catchment. Chris and Brent have had conversations, and other members of the exec bumping into people who similarly are going, we're not sure this is the best for our business either, in terms of that catchment management. And when I say catchment management, I'm not saying ICM, I'm saying a whole catchment management approach that the regional council brings to for big business. So yeah, it'll be interesting whether we see some submissions in to those folk from those folk rather than them just mentioning that to us.
And just in question 3, I disagree that the chair's role is full-time. Thank you.
Why do you think it's?
You've indicated otherwise. So do you need any more from us on this? Is this the end of the conversation?
I'd say let us have a crack at reshaping it. The strategy and policy agenda is due out on Monday afternoon.
This coming Monday.
This coming Monday, because remember we've had a bunch of statutory holidays during the submission period as well, and one day is a lot when you're trying to do this. So we will do our best to have a crack at it over the next couple of days. Again, when it goes in that agenda, it will still be a draft. So we'll get to have another shot at it through Stratton Poll. So I'd say we've heard you. We've all been taking copious amounts of notes. If there is anything else, please just send an email to me, copied to Warren, so that we can send it to others, to Miffy and Sydney. But we would need that by midday tomorrow.
Just a question, do you need an extension? Would it be better for it to come to Stratton Poll as a late item rather than have to go out?
It's not my preference.
Not your preference?
No.
Kind of work them hard.
And because Brooke's giving me the side eye. No, I would rather have something in there, coming back to really what Gary said, I'd rather have something in there that's about 80, 85 as opposed to focus on getting it to 100, because it's there, it's in the agenda. It's always easier for your good sales to have one document as opposed to 2 or 3.
Yep. Too many iterations.
Okay.
Brooke. We'll break now till 1:45. Thank you, Miffy and Sydney. So off you go. Keep where you go. You've got work to do.